You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and today we're going to do a deep dive into Shopify as a whole. A couple new announcements came out yesterday, and have Jordan Brannon, longtime friend, on the line as well to kind of walk through some of those things. They've been great friends, partners, supporters. He's been on multiple times to keep us updated as a group, but it's going to be fun. So a lot of things we want to tackle, where they're at, where they're headed, any new competitions that's out there, new releases that might be important, what they're doing with AI, a ton of great stuff. So over the next 30, 40 minutes or so, we're going to tackle as much of this as possible. But Jordan, I don't mind if you want to jump in, a brief intro on yourself and Coalition. You guys are awesome. That would be great. And then we can jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Very cool. Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jordan Brannon, as Aaron has already called out. President and co-founder at Coalition Technologies. We're an e-commerce focused digital agency, long-time designer, developer, marketer with the Shopify platform and some of the key competitors there. Most of our work today is in D2C, but we also have a significant footprint in B2B work as well. So just have been digging in over the last few days on the Shopify Summer Editions 2023 announcements and some of the buzz that's happening and some of the buzz that probably shouldn't be happening around everything that Shopify is talking about doing or has already done.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm going to just jump into it a little bit because, Shopify is in an interesting spot where it seems like they need to head upstream. This is just my opinion, right? Just talking to brands on a weekly basis. Have a focus on growing to the mid-market enterprise level. And I know they're doing a lot of releases to tackle that, but would love to hear your thoughts of, if you want to run down like the few things that came out, the summer edition releases, that would be awesome.
Yeah. It's really interesting sort of what we're seeing with summer editions and then even some of the stuff that came out before it. There is sort of this sense that Shopify still believes it can be everywhere, everything all at once, whatever that movie title was. A few of the people that I really look to for insights in e-commerce and specifically in Shopify have talked about how they need to have that directional choice. They need to be the commerce ecosystem where they're really emphasizing the pay products, or they need to focus on the entrepreneur and the small business, or they need to go up market. And Shopify seems to be saying, well, we think we can do all of them. We think we can support the entrepreneur. We think we can go up market to the enterprise and contend with the Salesforce commerce clouds. And we can also still be the commerce ecosystem and bring everything together in a way that nobody really has done. And if you look at Shopify Editions, it just seems to reinforce that. I think a lot of people who saw the press releases have been sort of digging through their website and some of the new announcements, heard from Toby a few days prior to Editions. There was a kind of maybe a surprising emphasis on the entrepreneur and the small business. That was probably the biggest surprise that came out of that. Maybe the least surprising thing that Shopify had to offer was lots and lots of AI products. I think everyone is doing AI on everything, and Shopify is sort of catching that same sort of tailwind and is launching a number of different AI products to, again, help stay in the conversation and stay sort of front and center as a commerce platform for everyone.
Do you think that so one thing I did like, going back a few months is the spinning off of Deliver, right? That helps with the focus as a whole. But do you think they're going to continue to shed all that other stuff? I mean, expanding the credit card, stuff like that. Like, I agree with you. They should stay focused. But why? And I think everybody I talk to says that.
Yep.
But they're not.
Yeah. I mean, someone wisely told me that money pays. It's one of the consistent truths you see in e-commerce is that really money kind of happens through the payment processors, the payment gateways, the different wallets. Those are, very secure revenue channels and profit centers for a lot of businesses in e-commerce. Platforms come and go, third-party tech solutions come and go, the warehousing business can come and go, but there's a lot of money to be made in the money side of it and the finance side of it. So I don't see Shopify really moving away from that. The Deliver, we actually had this conversation, I think, Aaron, a few years ago when they first announced the Deliver acquisition. I think you were one of the first people I told that, I really believe this is more about a stock play than it is about actually doing anything meaningful. They just wanted to signal to the market at a key moment in time that they viewed their competition as Amazon and Walmart, not as BigCommerce or Adobe, Magento, or as the other commerce platforms. They were really trying to position themselves as the third horse in the race against the Amazons and the Walmart. And it really did. You watch what happened in the months that followed, and it seemed like the market bought that story, that Shopify was going to be the one to contend with Amazon. And I think it served its purpose, help them sort of leap to the next step in their growth. And they could unwind it now because they have enough other things going. They have the right marketing position to sort of absorb the loss of it. So all in, I don't see them stepping away from the payments and the finance things. I think you'll continue to see Toby and the leadership there really be mindful of the fact that the e-commerce piece of things, the software, the plans, really is the sort of doorway to getting access to the merchants and to the real money centers. It's not actually where Shopify anticipates making their living.
Yeah. No, I love it. And then, that was the conversation we had. And I think you're right. Financially, on paper, was it the best thing? Will you just look at it numbers by numbers? Probably not. But did it send the right signal? Did it get the right buy-in? And did it push them in to a space? I mean, even those instances where you push the critical thinking internally at an organization. Yep. And, the cool thing is they did cut bait. Right, because I think a lot of people were scratching their head saying, "Hey, how is this going to work out?"
I was really surprised with that. Like, I thought their play would be something we're actually seeing Amazon and even Target doing a bit of. I really thought Shopify would take advantage of the relationship they have with millions of merchants who are leasing small warehousing spaces throughout the globe. And I whether that's in the back of a retail showroom or if it is a standalone warehouse in middle America someplace, it seemed like what I was anticipating was they're going to develop the hardware and the software solutions to drop off, basically, and you pay a subscription fee to them. And they then allow that merchandise to become connected to the broader Shopify ecosystem. I thought, with the Shop Marketplace app, maybe it's not a marketplace app, sort of play, it would really make sense if they could surface all this inventory around the country and local to people. And now we're seeing again, Amazon do that with some retail partners. So maybe that's still down the line. But I honestly thought Deliver was sort of, we're going to cut our teeth. We'll have some centralized warehousing. We'll learn the software and the hardware of warehousing and inventory management, and then we'll be able to productize that in the same way we did e-commerce. And apparently that didn't happen. Maybe it could still happen, but it is sort of an interesting, pivot away from that for them.
Yeah, the warehousing, the 3PL mindset is drastically different, right?
Yep.
Than the tech solution that they have,
Yep.
and then getting people on board with it, where a lot of people don't want to have anything more complicated, right?
Yep.
They want the Shopify site, they want it up, they want to sell, they want to pick, pack, ship it, and have it go out the door.
Yep.
And this was maybe one more layer of complexity.
Yep.
Do you have any favorites on the AI stuff that's popping out? And then I also want to get to, can they swim upstream?
Yeah.
And can they get enterprise level? And I know they can't. I believe they can. But anyways, first, I don't know, any of the new AI stuff that is it worth taking a look at?
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, so, certainly, within the Shopify sphere, Shopify Magic, Sidekick, and some of the ways that they're deploying AI, I think are really helpful. They're pretty low hanging fruit. And so I think that is probably the advantage for Shopify, is they can go in meaningfully on AI in some very obvious ways that provide very obvious benefits to merchants, to merchant customers, to merchant staff. And so that's, I think, is really an intuitive first step. It again connects Shopify to the AI buzz, so they're not sort of missing that opportunity, but they are allowing small merchants to create good content that is helpful to customers. They are delivering this Sidekick tool, which in theory will, again, not a public release thing yet, but will in theory really allow Shopify merchants, or perhaps non-technical people, to communicate conversationally to get things done. I mean, that's a real issue. As an agency, we have some internal jokes sometimes, about people we see show up with an MSN or AOL email address, and some of the concerns we have about technical proficiency when that happens. And something like Sidekick is a really great tool. And from an agency perspective, we're kind of excited about that. So I think it's a maybe it won't be taking a $5 a year business and making it a $50 million a year business, but I think it'll definitely relieve some of the headaches and the challenges people have operating e-commerce stores, which is, I think, again, a really nice deployment for them.
Awesome. So now the pressing question, do you think they can swim upstream?
Yeah, it's an interesting, and I think they are, but for maybe some different reasons that people are thinking about. One of the most interesting things we've seen as we've been in the Shopify ecosystem for the last 12, 13 years now, 14 years, has been, we're watching e-commerce mature with people whose first experience in e-commerce has been with Shopify. Maybe their first positive experience in e-commerce has been with Shopify. And those people go from starting their own drop shipping business in 2010 because of a YouTube video they saw. That doesn't work out, but they are now in the market as a e-commerce person. They become an e-commerce manager. They then become a director of e-commerce, and then they become a VP of digital commerce solutions or something fun like that. And they're at much larger companies. And so we're seeing the Shopify footprint grow naturally, because Shopify doesn't give you a lot of really strong reasons to say no to Shopify, and they give you a lot of easy reasons to say yes. And so increasingly, we're seeing big businesses willing to make some sacrifices in terms of feature or complexity support to sort of work with Shopify, because that's what everybody's familiar with. And so that's really helped them grow up market. And along the way, there is a real sense as an agency partner, Shopify is willing to sell something before they can solve for it. And then Toby and the team are out there, plugging holes as quickly as they can. So you look at like the Editions announcement. Some of them, they are the same things they announced in winter, and some of them are the same things they announced last summer. But they just kind of keep re-announcing the same thing and incrementally making them a little bit better to solve for the promises they made a year ago. And frankly, they're just not big enough issues where people are really throwing up a big stink in the market about it. So yeah, I think they are moving up market. I think there's a willingness from large enterprise businesses to sacrifice some complexity on the commerce front end to be able to use Shopify, which is a real challenge for other commerce platforms out there.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts there. One, when they're out there selling before it's actually complete, I don't mind that normally. I mean, that is him forcing his team to stay on the cutting edge of what's coming out. He's going to make promises and then ask them to go fulfill it. Yep. And if you're not always trying to stay out in front, then it gets kind of, you start to fall behind. And so I like the leadership that's going on there. I like the fact that he's throwing, hey, we're going to go do this. And then behind the scenes, it's like, everybody inside is like, what did he just promise?
Yep. Yeah. And agencies, we get a little annoyed because we have to pick up some of those pieces. And, we're in sort of the sales weeds. Coalition is a platform agnostic agency, meaning we're not agnostic about what platform you choose. We think there's a right platform for everyone. And so sometimes we'll deal with a RFP situation where someone's saying, but Shopify says I can do this. And we're like,
Right.
well, that was in the announcement for the additions. But if you look back a year, they announced the same thing. It still isn't here. You can kind of end around with these apps or this customization. So sometimes there is some challenges that come up with that. But again, it's been years, but I remember maybe 2012, 2013, I think it was Toby had said something like, we're aiming to solve, 90% of the problems in e-commerce for 70% of the businesses. So we're not aiming for 100% across the boards. And that still seems to be their operating ethos today. Provide a really, really high average. Now that they have sort of that dominant market position, people have to really come up with good reasons to say no to Shopify. And when you're providing that really strong, consistent average performance and above average performance, it really is difficult for brands, even big brands, to sort of walk away and say Shopify is not right for us. And that allows them to maintain the momentum and they can keep selling in front of what they're building.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting your comment too about, so a couple of things. I want to get to the complexity piece, and how people are looking to simplify, but also like how you're outlining as they've grown, you had these people who now after 13 years are in a leadership position and have primarily dealt with Shopify. And there's the familiarity piece. I run into it a lot just in brands I'm talking to. They're like, oh, I don't like the big commerce platform. Well, why not? Well, it just doesn't feel right. I've dealt with, Shopify for 12 years. Like, It's not bad. It just doesn't feel right. And like, yeah, that's right, I guess. It just doesn't feel right. So I really liked how you outlined is like, they do have a chance because they're now getting these people in leadership position who've only been on Shopify. Yeah, they have larger organizations or bounced around and as the organization has grown or they've grown them. Yep. And now you get to this point where they're comfortable. Yep. And Shopify just has to fulfill, right? They're almost already sold in.
Yep. And, even like in enterprise deals, a lot of e-commerce is still happening in sort of small scales. So we're working with, some, 10-figure-ish brands, they're, total valuations and, things like that. And they're dabbling with 7-figure businesses in e-commerce, right? So they're, sure, big business, one of the biggest, on earth, their e-commerce offering is small. And Shopify getting in the door as part of the first e-commerce practice, getting the legal paperwork signed, getting signed off by, IT and CTO, those are huge steps in enterprise organizations, sometimes even bigger than the RFP itself. And so, especially as a lot of brand marketers, brand managers are tasked with getting going on e-commerce, that sort of, we've covered some of these really painful big steps for the enterprise already with some small Shopify store 2 years ago, really does move them out in front of, platforms that may be more viable. Again, you sort of talk about big commerce where for a lot of merchants, the ability to support more complex use cases is better suited for the big commerce platform. But, big commerce is in sort of that short position of trying to, again, get through legal, get through CTO, sort of sign off, get through all of these different things. And Shopify has already had one go of it. And if someone needs to get something done in the next 3 months, you can't wait for legal. You can't wait for CTO sign off. And so, Shopify can jump back in front of things. Just, again, maybe not on the merits of the platform, just based on sort of opportunity.
Yeah. You highlighted it again, the complexity piece. So we're at this interesting time where over the past few years, everybody has signed up for every tool that's out there because they might need it or they might not, but they don't have time to necessarily figure out if they need it. They just need to get in there and say, hey, they did absolutely everything they could. Yep. And so now there's like a deconstructing of platforms going on where, and I see this even on an agency side where they want to simplify everything into a single agency. They want to simplify everything around their platform. They want to do a tech stack rationalization. Mm-hmm. It's this, we need to simplify, right? Yep. Because it's gotten almost out of control. We can't hire 4 more people at this point in time to try to figure it out. So let's trim it out.
Yep.
And so maybe that helps Shopify.
And it's interesting, like in some ways, to your point, I think the e-commerce tech solutions marketplace is more fragmented than it's ever been. I think that's a lingering effect from sort of the pandemic. Before there was AI getting all of the money all of the time, anything in e-commerce and digital commerce is getting all the money all of the time. That was sort of the pandemic sort of hype. And so there's a lot of companies that really don't have a differentiated reason as to why they should exist, offering loyalty, offering social selling, offering, email, SMS, now AI. There's just a lot of companies like that. And so a lot of brands, though, have signed those contracts. They've, the brand managers couldn't do no wrong. They could sell anything in the middle of the pandemic, and they could show double-digit growth. And now there's sort of this recoil where, you've got to actually find the reasons for that growth and how to make that growth sticky, and also do it with a lower budget. And so there's a lot of cutting back that's occurring. And so there still is, though, that fragmented market. And a lot of those companies are still around. They're still contending for scraps. Shopify, if you look at the Editions announcement, they are going directly against some big partners they have and some big players in the commerce tech space. They've got B2B launches. They have more coming to Shop Store, which again is a marketplace app. They've got their collaborations with influencers for brands. They have the collective, which is sort of this idea that brands can cross-sell across Shopify stores with other like brands, which again sort of starts to play into some interesting spaces. You've got new subscriptions, new bundling products, new merchandising functionality. They're enhancing the front-end management capabilities of Shopify, which again challenges some of the headless story that Shopify has been trying to get involved in. And so there really is a sense that Shopify is saying like, hey, we're going to have the big ecosystem. You need to come and work with us if you want to be successful as an e-commerce player today, but we're going to keep you on your toes because you don't know how long until we decide to take your lunch too. And they're big enough where, people can't say no to that. They just are going to go along for the ride, and they have to. If they really want to achieve scale and if they're looking at, relevance in terms of share value and things like that.
Yeah, which then, it brings up the dilemma that brands have with Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Are they a partner or not? At the end of the day, they're not. They're there to make as much money for them as possible.
Yep.
And, so you have the same thing. You have the partner ecosystem side. Is it worth it? Well, there's a lot of money there, potentially short term, but are you also giving them all your data and letting them understand how to build the perfect platform?
Yep.
And then if you're on the brand side, you get locked in where it costs too much to get out.
Yep. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. And I think Shopify is leveraging some of that to push the shop marketplace, experiences. And again, whether or not you really want to call it a marketplace yet, sort of the features, the audience sharing. Again, there's this real sense that, Shopify is going to take your customer and make it available to other Shopify brands and then make money off of that ability, which again, doesn't sound much like a partner when you sort of look at it that way. For some brands, that opportunity to grow through another store's audience, could be really compelling. But for some, they're going to have some very strong reasons why that's not very compelling. And then you have to make the decision, are the benefits of everything else I'm having with Shopify and with their stores that really worth it for us? And so I think there's a bit of a race against time for Shopify to always prove that they have enough value that it's sort of the obvious choice, even if they're not necessarily a faithful partner. But they still are the obvious choice, regardless of any double dipping they might be doing.
That marketplace stuff, it's like proportional to size, right?
Yep.
But it hits a peak, right?
Yep.
You're smaller, you love it because it's growing. Then you get to the point where you're benefiting less and everybody else is benefiting more, and your appetite for it goes way down.
Yep.
And if they can stay, does that push them again? Does that somehow lock them in at a lower tier? These are all fun things that they're going to have to watch, right? Because that's the reality. Yep. If I'm a large brand, I do not want you sharing my customer.
Yep.
If I'm a small brand, I want to share customers with the big brand because of the crossover that could potentially be there.
Yeah, but I think that forces sort of a thought process for large brands that are using Shopify. You have to think about the Shopify website as one thing, and then you have to approach your strategy with Shop as another, and really consider whether or not the website itself is compelling enough. And then, I would think about Shop as a distinctive thing. If you see a lot of value in Shop, maybe that is going to enhance the value of the Shopify website experience enough to sort of warrant using Shopify for your e-commerce platform. But again, if you're a big brand and you're not looking to acquire a relatively small market of consumers, it may not make sense. However, if you're a brand that is doing really well, you're digitally native, you're good at sort of that short form, video kind of content experience, sort of the true entrepreneur, it could be a really exciting opportunity. It's sort of a closed channel for you, and it could play well with your existing TikTok content and Instagram strategy and things like that. And so, again, maybe all of a sudden the Shopify website becomes a necessity because of the Shop Pay, or not Shop Pay, but the Shop opportunity. Too many shops in the kitchen right now.
Well, I mean, then we have the new player that's trying to break in, Shopware, right? Which is kind of interesting as a whole. I don't know if there's enough room for them here. A cool offering.
Yeah.
But you're going up against Magento, Adobe Commerce, whatever we want to call it now, and a BigCommerce and a Shopify. And then we're leaving off like a commerce tools for the mega organizations, right? The massive ones that are going to go completely headless. And it'll be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. One thing that comes up a bunch is around just replatforming, though, if people need to. Yeah. What does that landscape look like at this point in time? Maybe you are moving in and you're on a BigCommerce, or you're on you're on a Magento and you want to jump over to a Shopify, or vice versa. What does that landscape look like now? Is it easier than ever, or with all this additional tie-ins, is it harder than ever?
I do think it's easier than ever. One of the big things we're seeing a lot of the commerce platforms make a commitment to is in that sort of feed connectivity. So BigCommerce and Shopify, Adobe, they all have the ability to consume and pull in data from a lot of different sources natively. A lot of them have great partnerships that allow them to do that in sort of a better way. BigCommerce, has purchased Feedonomics. Part of Shopify's additions announcement was this sort of new marketplace connector. Some of that can be used to pull in data from other stores. And so the migration is actually, a lot easier than it has been. Where you tend to get into trouble as a merchant is more in your apps. And again, because especially for like Shopify merchants, a lot of them are maybe more app dependent than they would be elsewhere. You have to consider migrating the data out of your apps to these other platforms. And sometimes it's not supported one-to-one, even if the same app provider exists in the Shopify ecosystem and in the Adobe ecosystem. They may not have the same product. There may be some limitations in terms of functionality, between the two of them. And so that migration of sort of app-centric data becomes more challenging for brands. But by and large, the experience is a lot simpler than it used to be. A lot of the big SEO risks can be addressed, which is, again, one of our focus areas. And I think a lot of agencies are a lot more competent about how to execute a migration well. And so that's also sort of helped the ecosystem around e-commerce is a bit more aware of how to make those migrations happen. So there's a lot less risk. It can happen a lot faster. We had one of our merchants at the BigCommerce Partner Summit just a few weeks ago who was on stage and was talking about a couple week-long migration process off of a legacy WooCommerce build to BigCommerce, to a B2B and B2C offering, connecting that into some of their marketplaces in a way they hadn't been able to, and into an ERP. I think the total timeline was like 6 weeks. And so you can do that very quickly when you have sort of the right scope of work.
Yeah. Anything on the Shopify side, new release that we've missed? And then I also want to open it up. Like, I've been picking your brain for like a half hour. Always like to give people the opportunity to pick my brain as well. But any other cool stuff that popped up on the Shopify Summer Edition?
Yeah, I think the things I'm really interested in is certainly the AI tool seems very merchant friendly, especially at that small business side of things. Some of the things that maybe didn't get as much attention just because they are maybe more developer forward. We're really interested in some of the new APIs that we have, some of the ability to edit checkout and checkout experiences, either through apps or even through just individual customizations for stores. Those things are really, really interesting to us. As a marketing agency, part of what we think about is how do we build average order value? How do we build customer loyalty? And so some of the things that they're doing with bundling and subscriptions are again, they're challenging some very established and strong providers in the market, but they also create additional value for Shopify merchants, and they simplify the connection into the order and customer experience. So those are some of the areas that we're really, I think, pretty intrigued by. There's I've always picked on the Shopify's ability to only support 100 product variants. They're starting to release some API endpoints to escape that. So there is some old things in the Shopify limitations series that are kind of going away. So those are probably the big things I think I would highlight as any merchant who's interested in what came out of that and what's interesting. Those are probably a few of the things that I highlight.
Yeah, awesome, love it. Any questions for me?
Yeah, you have an ear to the ground like nobody else, and so I was curious on your side, outside of sort of these buzzy AI announcements, like, is there somebody out there in commerce, in AI, who actually really has intrigued you a bit? Like you've sat in on the conversation and you're like, this seems like a more compelling use case to me right now, versus when the AI actually takes over and we just are polishing our robot overlords casing.
No, not a ton. I mean, it was funny to follow it, right? Like ChatGPT itself is going to take over the world.
Yeah.
Right. And then all of a sudden, well, maybe it's not. Oh, wait, maybe it's not pulling the most accurate data because it's, a few years old, what it's pulling from. I think that the coolest uses for it right now from an organizational standpoint are you empowering your people with 15, 20 minutes a day to fool around with the tools that are out there. I think that's imperative. There's nobody I've seen that's like exploded on the scene, and I'm hearing from, 5 out of the 20 brands I talk to a week, these guys are awesome. It's more, I think, a lot of the current tech partners who are using AI on the back end to power what they have to offer, which is essentially, I think, what people really want anyways.
Yep. Right?
They've got a trusted partner that they've been working for this for a long time. Just give me a new tool or enhance your tool.
Yep.
That's kind of what I see taking place right now. I still think at some point in time, a lot of companies will have a chief AI officer. I think there will be enough tools that are out there, and it's going to affect R&D. It's going to affect HR. It's going to affect sales, obviously, marketing. You're going to have somebody that's kind of like controlling and vetting it all out, like a digital marketer, I don't know, a chief digital officer would do today for the new tech stack you're bringing. And maybe it falls to them. But I mean, there's so many legal aspects that have to be vetted out. I don't know if we put that on a CDO or not.
Yeah. That is the interesting, the legal challenges that are mounting around. You really have just stolen other people's content. Like that is what you are doing. But you're just able to more artfully reframe that theft. Is sort of an interesting, and it'll be interesting to see if that redefines some of our copyright laws and some of the protections. Obviously, large tech companies have been pretty effective in limiting legislative movement on that front over the last 20 years. So it'd be interesting if AI can actually be the galvanizing point for some real movement to happen to sort of change how the U.S. thinks about copyright and what's original content and what's derivative work and all of that sort of thing. So it's pretty interesting. I like the idea of an AI officer or, the director of AI resourcing, because there is so many different things that, come into play. Again, just legally, is there a copyright concern? Privacy? Are we publishing something into our cool new AI chat help widget that we shouldn't be? Like Aaron's typing into the company internet AI, like what's my password? Now Aaron's password is available to anybody who has access to it. So those things are really interesting and challenging, I think, for brands to be thinking about. We've probably seen the most benefit for us inside of that internal tool. We're deploying some AI features to our recruiting platform. We do a skills testing process with our candidates, and so using AI to help with some of the preliminary evaluation of people's responses to some of these questions. We have massive data set to work off of. We're using it as sort of like a help desk tool internally with some limited scope. We've got some high walls around that, and it seems to be really effective in those use cases. We're actually, probably a little more leery on using it directly on behalf of our clients, but we're trying to find some ways to make that an efficiency gain where we can make our people more powerful, more fast by deploying AI for them in a way that then benefits our customers.
Yeah, I can see like having AI write code.
Yep.
Right, to make it all a lot easier. Maybe just start dragging and dropping whatever you want and reconfiguring, and it's automatically doing it on the back end. I just, number one, you can't break a site right now and have it go down. Number two, I think it's just a lot of people are leery of it because they don't want to get in trouble for the content creation side. And there's a lot of smaller companies that are using it all the time. Yeah, we're talking to mid-market enterprise level. There's people playing around with it, and that's great. But there's just a lot more barriers to fully deploy it.
Yeah. That's actually, I think that's part of what spurred a lot of what has happened in e-commerce in the last 15 years, and why digitally native brands can get such a fast trajectory is they're willing to move fast and break things, and sometimes break the law, maybe unintentionally. There's some famous stories about digitally native brands that were just plain text faulting credit cards and things like that, where you definitely shouldn't have done that, but it got you to your 8 figures and 9 figures, and then you got that money
security in place afterwards, and
send the I'm sorry check when the class action lawsuit lands. AI will be interesting like that. I think you'll see a lot of maybe similar to what we just talked about with Shopify, where what happens in the enterprise is actually fed by these really aggressive early adopters who start and fail. A few of them will succeed and they'll be the enterprise companies 10 years from now, but some of those people who start and fail will take some of that skill set, and then they're going to end up at a Fortune 100 company, and that's off to the races in terms of their career path there. So it'll probably be one way or another. We'll see some of this, I think, early adoption and the outcomes of that really driving what happens in a few years for the enterprise too.
Yeah. So as we get close to the end here, what are you most excited about over the next, 6 months?
Ooh, we're really hot on video commerce, and I think one of the things that maybe is a counterpoint to AI is humanized content and things that are really obviously human, and so video still seems to be one of those places where AI is more obvious. Jordan's not glitching. The course of this video, right? Exactly.
Let's throw back.
Yes.
People listening out there.
Yes, yeah, and so I think that's really interesting for us. We're doing a lot of experimentation there. We just did a product launch with BigCommerce and with a headless checkout solution called Bold Checkout, Bold Commerce, and they have a checkout product that's works on a bunch of different platforms, but doing a live stream video with an embedded checkout experience, which has been really cool. Merchants have been really excited by that. It doesn't require a third party from your existing e-commerce stack. And then a differentiated checkout. So that same sort of headless checkout approach, we've been able to sort of escape all roads lead to the same bad checkout, and have been able to embed checkout into really unique content experiences. So that's really exciting for us. Certainly we're going to keep watching the AI front and seeing what's there, and see if there's things that do begin to really add meaningful value quickly, and in a sticky way. That'll be fun. And then obviously as an SEO agency, we're really curious just about what the AI assisted experiences in search results do to who ranks and what the click-through rates are, how that impacts ad performance. So those are the things that are keeping me up at night, but not in a bad way. My mind is a little too active to go to sleep because I'm puzzling these things over.
Awesome. Well, I think we're pretty much right at time here. Jordan, you and the team at Coalition, just fantastic partners. So really appreciate you and your time today. I'd say reach out to Jordan on LinkedIn. Check him out, Coalition Technologies. Is it just coalitiontechnologies.com?
Yep, that's it.
And 100%. They're fantastic partners for a ton of brands in the network. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks everybody for tuning in.